call the Division Two meeting to order and invite the Lottery Commission folks up to talk about the lottery budget. And perhaps after you introduce yourselves, you could tell us how you're going to go through so people that are watching might understand what the flow we're following.
Okay, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Charlie McIntyre. I'm the director of the New Hampshire Lottery. I've had the privilege of being that for almost 15 years now. And with me today is my colleague, our Chief Financial Officer, Jim Duras. Essentially, Mr. Chairman, if it pleases the committee, I was going to go through a very brief couple of slides to present both what is our graph of our revenues versus expenses, and then obviously our revenues by product. And then obviously explain briefly each of the products we sell, and then answer any questions. I don't expect this to be a long process. I know you folks may have a lot of questions given the nature of what we do and how we do it and why. Well, I know the why, it's money. But our budget is very simple. So that's essentially the process, Mr. Chairman, if you want me to proceed.
Sure, did you bring some tickets for us?
Pardon?
Did you bring some tickets for us?
Oh, then you would have to file paper.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
You got to ask ahead of time. You just got,
No, please proceed.
of course. Certainly a very basic, the first slide obviously is an introductory one. The second one is essentially our expenses and profitability over the last decade. And I can say actually even going back further, when I first started at New Hampshire Lottery in 2011, our return to education trust fund was $62 million. In FY24, it was $207 million. So we have more than tripled the net profitability to the state. And as you see the expenses, they virtually remain flat the entire time. And as you can imagine, we run very much like a business. Our divisions are very much set up like business divisions: sales, marketing, security, finance. We have a compliance department, investigations and enforcement department. And so it's set up very much like a business to run like a business. And as you folks well know, we are I don't know if we're the most audited agency in the state, but we're close if we're not. Annually, the LBA audit team is there for 5 months a year, and they go over our books. They review our annual report, which is this document, which we don't send to everybody because it's a lot of paper, but it's available on our website, which I think I just probably hijacked your question, Mr. Chairman.
No, I was going to say, I think it's also available on the LBA's website. As well.
Yeah, and certainly they audit, and if you're interested, next month we go before fiscal for our review of the findings the LB audit team had. So our numbers are scrubbed as the most of any agency in the state, rightfully so.
Didn't we already see you this year?
You received, the report, but there's a follow-up management letter
Okay.
that comes, and there's a few findings.
I'll look forward to that.
I would point out that none of them relate to actually the finances, as our CFO would be happy to point out, but none relate to the math of things. And so certainly one of the points I try and raise, particularly with House Finance and Senate Finance, is while revenues and expenses are two different committees, they're two sides of the same coin. And so please, what you do here impacts revenue down the hall to your colleagues. And so that's one of the reasons I asked you to review this slide. And certainly contained within the governor's budget is an increased revenue estimate for FY 26 and 27, $185 million, which is a little over 12 million more annually than had been in the revenue estimates for House and Senate Ways and Means from the fall of last year. And so we've raised guidance essentially.
So am I reading this wrong? It looks like your revenues are going down in the next few years.
So the revenues are going down. So FY24 was an absolute high water mark where everything hit perfectly great. And what I mean by that is we had annual sales of Powerball, our record year far and away, because we had a record number of billion-dollar jackpots. And the reason we had a record number of billion-dollar jackpots is because interest rates went up. So the jackpot size is a function of the amount of cash we have on hand multiplied by a bond factor, which is interest rate driven, equals jackpot size. So where that ratio is usually 1.4, 1.5, so cash in hand times 1.4, it was 2.2, 2.3, 2.4. And so we had a number of billion-dollar jackpots, which is great for marketing. And we are, I'm proud to say, the #1 jurisdiction in the country for Powerball sales per capita. Out of the 48 that do it. What? But it's certainly a source of pride because everyone sells that ticket the same way across the country. And the fact that we do it the best is obviously a matter of pride for the staff. And kudos to the folks that we work with. But it was a perfect storm, and we're the #1 at it. And so there was a large profitability. And every Powerball ticket we sell, 40 cents of that is profit. So every dollar, 40 cents is profit. So for us, it's our highest margin ticket we sell. And so a dollar there is worth $2 and change in a scratch ticket sale. So that's why our sales are going up. It's just in what we make the most profit in is going down. Through no fault of ours, it's just the nature of Powerball. It's jackpots over $1 billion are like 3-foot snowstorms. They show up when they show up. The ping pong balls don't have a memory. I can't affect them. And so that's our revenue picture for the next 2 years and the remainder of this year. And obviously the last slide is a breakdown of, or the second last slide is a breakdown of where our sales come from. And as you can see, majority of our gross sales still come from scratch tickets. But contained within this graph and within the table within it is essentially all of our revenue streams broken out by product. And I'll pause for any questions at this point.
Representative Popovich?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. Is that gross revenue or the net, the profit?
Sure, it's actually it's a gross revenue, but in some cases, like for scratch tickets, this is gross revenue before prizes are paid out. And in the case of, pardon? And iLottery and sports betting, that's net of prizes before expenses are factored in.
I don't know how much extra work would it be to also have a similar chart with the, profits per game. Let's say leaving out the, budget that you actually spend the 11
Sure.
million, whatever you pay for staff. Never mind that overhead because there is no point in allocating it, but just in terms of the gross profit per product.
Yeah, it's certainly.
I'm sure it's somewhere in a report.
Yeah, it is. Certainly we don't break out, as you can imagine, we try and cross-product staff. So a number of, my colleague here, Jim, does the finances for all the buildings, so I don't factor out him, but certainly we can get you a close approximation, Representative, of what it is profit per product line as a, yeah. Can you write that down so I don't forget it?
Yeah, page 40. It's also page 42 of our report. It's a summarized version.
Oh, okay. Actually, if you look at page 42 of the annual report, which is on our website, it does a breakdown.
No follow-up needed. We're good with that. Thank
Okay,
you.
all right. And certainly, the gross sales have gone up dramatically since 10 years ago. We were around $250 million in gross sales. Now it's $633 million in gross sales, and it will continue to go up. I wanted to bring your attention to the prioritized needs that we put in for the budget, and certainly for the committee's consideration of putting it back in the budget. One is to update our security system, which is outdated and it's not compatible with our existing infrastructure. I think the cameras are running on Windows 7, if I'm not mistaken, which has no longer been patched since 2012, maybe 15. Okay, yeah. So it's home, and it runs on its own PC in its own server, in its own house because it's so older. And then obviously upgrades to our entranceway to make it more ADA compliant. It's not particularly ADA compliant. The door is too hard to open and the ramp is not perfect. And so those are just two needs we have. I mean, there were a number of needs that were met in the budget, but those two were additional as well. To be sure, I think our budget is straightforward.
So before you go beyond that,
Sure.
so you're running a single IBM Windows 7 machine right now?
Correct. That's running the security system. The rest of the operation is based on OIT. It's through OIT, and that's up to date. But the security system is running off a single server, managing the cameras that surveil the building.
Your own building?
Correct. Our own building. Yes.
Oh. What do you need those for?
Pardon?
What do you need that for? You don't need money there, do you?
No. It's
You got gold bars in the basement?
So we have neighbors who have set up camp in a abandoned lot next to us, and in some cases it varies between 5 and 50 homeless folks who come visit our building, use our water spigot, and we did not, as a matter of courtesy and just out of humanity, did not put a lock on the spigot. It's August. I'm not going to let these folks die of heat stroke because we don't. So, but we do need security for the building itself. People do think, honest to God, we had a jackpot of, I think it was $500 million, and it was $400 million in cash. And I swear they thought that we had the money in the building. Like, where do you keep that money? I'm like, what, in a locker room? And, yeah.
Oh, okay, but on a serious note,
Yeah.
because I'm a Macintosh guy, but I have
Okay,
to have
sure.
a PC for some stuff that I do, and I'm like you, I'm way back there.
Yeah.
Since it's only controlling your cameras, what's your concern about having the fact that the software is out of date?
It's going to die eventually. I mean, certainly we had 2 old firewalls that run our firewalls and the servers, and they were both 10 years old. We turned them off, and they both died immediately. So clearly there was embedded in that firewall a kill after so many years because we don't want to sell them more. And so at some point we're fearful it's not going to work.
Okay. But when you say firewall, the way you just described it, it sounds like you turned off a router.
No, different products, different. So there were firewalls in our computer room. This system is different. The surveillance system we're requesting is different thing. My fear is that we turn it off one day, move it, and it won't go back on. And then now the surveillance system is dead.
Okay. I mean, I just got to say, $100,000 for a PC sounds like an awful lot of money.
I think it's also an upgrade though.
Excuse me to interrupt that, but this would be an upgrade to the whole system. It would be getting cameras that aren't 30 years old as well, and fewer cameras than we have now, modernizing it, getting it into where. And one of the risks is when it's on a single PC like this, theoretically, if something happened and someone took that computer, there's no backing up. There's nothing on the server to show what happened that night. This is a standalone piece. If that computer goes and something happens, you have nothing to view what happened with it.
Got it, but you can buy 2 PCs for a lot less than $100,000.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm sorry,
It's a whole system.
but also
help me understand what a whole system is. You're just controlling a couple of cameras.
sorry, I dismissed your question. So,
Nope.
But it was also to upgrade the front sales office in terms of physical plant. Right now, the public can see inside our buildings through glass doors. And there's no security for the sales office. The glass is not bulletproof. The walls aren't bulletproof. And every so often we have a situation that's remarkably uncomfortable for our sales staff, where one of two things happens. One is somebody thinks they won and they didn't win.
Say that again.
Someone thinks they won and they didn't win.
Okay.
They thought it was a 1 and it's actually a 10 or whatever. Or 2, and more aggressively, is we're required to offset child support enforcement payments. So if you are in arrears in child support and you come and win, we have to grab that money, even though in some instances you may have already paid it, just not has gotten through the system. And those folks tend to be unhappy.
Fair enough, but so how does this help with that problem?
So it was, it's both surveillance in terms of the equipment, the servers, the cameras, but also to add a layer of security to the front office, harden up the wall that sits below waist level for our employees, as well as change the doors to not be clear glass looking into our offices.
So that's not the excessive, that's not the $30,000 piece?
No, that's no. Is it? Oh, it is? No, it's ADA compliance. It is? thought it was still like, important for the general public versus sales.
Yeah, but it's true. That system, that number is an estimate given to us by DOIT. So it's
Okay.
something we work on.
Was it
Which?
the 100,000? Yeah.
Okay. That makes me even more suspicious. I was just going to tell you. Well, okay. You know we're in a tight budget
Of
situation.
course.
so
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Anything you can do to,
Yeah, but absolutely. No, I apologize for not having a better knowledge of it. So.
not a problem. Representative Pavlovich?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, sorry for stepping out for a moment. I got a phone call that whoever called me should have known better than to call me during a hearing. And they were told that. So I have a different question. You started by saying that, expenses didn't change that much. And obviously the graph, when you look at the revenues, they are very long lines. But when you look at the shorter lines and the actual operating expenses, from 2022, which admittedly is kind of a low water mark, to 2025, it's 3 years and a 76% increase in operating expenses. Now, obviously, you didn't come here with all the details in that,
Yeah.
but I would like to have a very thorough understanding of why, the increases are quite that steep in operating expenses. I'm sure you have good reasons. I would just like to understand them because, as the chairman was saying, and frankly, we've been saying it to everybody it's a tight budget year, and we appreciate the many dollars you put into the education trust fund, but expenses still need to be scrutinized, obviously, with an eye towards not, robbing Peter to pay Paul and saving $1 in expenses to lose 10 in revenue, right?
Yes.
So we are keenly aware of that, but it is still a sharply climbing year-over-year number from 2022 to 2025 projected. And we'd really want to understand, at least I would want to understand way more detail on what drives it, what is essential, and so on and so forth.
Sure. Certainly, if you remember the negotiated collective bargaining agreement,
10% is 10%,
10% of that
yes.
is that we also added a number of employees because this body and the governor agreed to allow charitable gambling rooms to add historic horse racing. And so that now has 2,400 gaming machines in the state. And that number is going to increase by 1,500 in the next 3 weeks. So you're talking now 4,000 gaming machines. So we increased our regulatory footprint, our investigators, our licensing footprint.
As I said, I'm sure you have good
yeah.
reasons. I would just like to better understand the
Sure.
steep increase, right?
Yeah, no, of course.
Some issues we're aware of, some we are
Yeah.
not, and we need to understand.
And honestly, one of the also things is because we've increased revenues, one of the hardest things to do in a business is scale up, obviously. And we've increased advertising significantly. I think we increased it 20% over the last budget versus this current biennium, just to support the growth. As you can imagine, we have a number of additional verticals we didn't have 10 years ago. We have internet, we have sports betting, we have just a number of things we have to add. And honestly, advertising got more expensive because of the vast number of channels you can advertise through. You can do so. We have full-time folks who do nothing but social media because it's a constant stream of data. Our benefits went up by, about a similar amount as payroll. And then DOIT was a significant expense because we are trying to launch a Salesforce application for the lottery itself to maintain a customer database of folks who call in, have issues. Up until, still, we use pen and paper, we use notepads, emails, texts, so-and-so called. We don't have a tracking system of that. And so that was an additional expense as well that was approved in the last biennial budget. So, but I can certainly get them line by line, Representative, to your point, if you want. But those are the four of the main ones that all derived large, and it was meant to support the business and sort of be more customer friendly.
I appreciate the color commentary and of course more details, and I understand it's a follow-up item. I didn't expect you to just
No, of course.
go into that detail. I just want you to know that I would like to.
Yeah, of course. No, and certainly not just discounting the fact that expenses matter. And I can tell you that in a global sense, we've never spent our budget. Not once, not ever have we ever spent every dollar that was allocated. One of the reasons is because the budgeting purpose here, it's really just a paper entry because we spend from our own revenue stream. And so if we don't spend it, it means it returns to profit. And so if we don't think it's going to drive revenue growth, we don't spend it. And I can suggest to you in terms heartily that my colleague to my right is the most conservative spender of money that has ever graced the good Lord's earth. So like all CFOs.
Did he say you added employees?
Correct. We added,
So when?
well, we've always had the positions that were funded. We just filled them.
When? Oh, you had 4 vacancies.
Correct. We've always had vacancies and we just didn't fill them until we needed them. And then we really needed them.
So no vacancies now?
Well, we have vacancies now. We have 13 positions vacant.
And are they funded or unfunded?
They're all funded.
Oh, they're all funded. And is there any plan to fill them?
Certainly, yes, but not as of yet. We're trying to, like I said, we're going through cycles, and there are 2 gaming rooms that are coming online the next 3 weeks, one in Rochester and one in Nashua, which is very large. And we're trying to get through the operational phase of launching them and then see thereafter what's needed in terms of maintaining them, regulating them. So the short answer is yes, but not by date certain.
Do you have any idea what they're funded at?
No. Funded in terms of,
Well, they're funded positions. They must have a dollar amount associated with it.
oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't have, but I had it honest. Okay. They were investigator, I think, is a labor grade 20. Sorry.
Okay, anyway. That's
Yeah, I think it's 23, but they end up being usually for us, almost exclusively, ex-law enforcement for other states. Sort of retired police officers from other states end up being our investigators.
Representative DeRoy.
Can you tell me how many employees do you have right now?
We have 84 employees, but currently, but that includes our 3 commissioners. So really, it's 81 employees who are operationally working at the lottery.
Do they all, can I follow up?
Yes.
Do they all work in your facility, in this facility?
So no, we have 2 offices. We have the lottery headquarters, which is on Integra Drive. We have a regional office, which really houses the majority of our investigations and enforcement division. And then we have a number of employees whose job is to be on the road.
Okay, thank you.
What was the total you gave?
81 plus 3 commission.
Yeah, so our commission is really just a board of directors.
Okay, so 80 plus your commissioner?
Yeah, they have the title commissioner, but really it's not like a real, I don't say not real, they're very real, but they don't act like other commissioners.
I'm just trying to get an accurate count. Because it
Yeah.
says you have 93 employees, and then you take away 13 vacancies, that comes to 80.
Yeah,
And the commissioner's not an employee, or the 81st person?
they're
is?
paid, but it's a stipend. It's not like a full-time employee. They're paid, I think the chair is paid 20,000 and the 2 other commissioners, I think, get 12,000 a year. It's not a full-time position.
Carry on.
And certainly, no, to that point, as you can see from our budget, the large increases have been really based around payroll, OIT, benefits, and advertising, all of which go to support our products. And certainly, that's all I had, Mr. Chairman. As you can imagine, our budget is very simple. We don't get grants, we don't get federal money, we don't get donations. I would like to point out that we spend from our revenue stream. So it's not really a budget item. If you cut us, there's not really a saving somewhere to go someplace else. Because it'll just go as profit from us to the Education Trust Fund.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just so we're clear, that's what we're here about.
By the same token, I would submit that over the last number of years, we've never spent our budget, never even come close to spending our budget. So we acted like grown-ups. So I'd ask that to be taken into consideration and not punish us because that's all. Record profit growth is not that easy to do.
Mickey?
So just to inform the committee of how lottery's budget typically works in the past when doing it in division, Ways and Means will come up with a revenue estimate, which they've gone through that process. That is really what's going to impact your bottom line for Education Trust Fund. Historical practices, if you make a reduction in lottery commission's operating budget here or make an add, like the 2 that they've requested here, that wouldn't change anything. We would look at this as other funds. The revenue estimate is done separate. So lottery will provide a revenue estimate to Ways and Means, and they'll look at it as that's what they'll bring in based on the budget that lottery asks for. So when if, for instance, it would be a new practice for this committee, which not saying it's in the purview of this committee, you can do whatever you want to do. If you were to reduce a class line by $50,000, we wouldn't necessarily carry something on the surplus statement adding $50,000 to the education trust fund.
How about $1 million?
Again, that's up to the committee if you want to do
No, I'm just
something.
asking, what would you do if it was that?
Even $5 would be up to the committee to do. I'm just letting you know historical practice with how we've done the lottery's budget. This committee can do whatever you want to do, but I'm just letting you know how it's worked in the past.
Okay. Representative Popovich?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to assure you that we pay close attention to who the grown-ups are in terms of the agencies, and we appreciate agencies that show the discipline, and we make sure that we don't punish them for not spending their budget by cutting their budget, right? So we're just talking about what's truly needed and genuinely understanding the needs of the agencies, and we appreciate, everything you guys do. But second, at the end of the day, every dollar you guys don't spend, whether we recognize it early in the budget process or not, will end up, if it doesn't affect revenue, right? Any additional profit will be reflected in the education trust fund, which is not the general fund, but it's still very real money that goes for real purposes. So in the past, we may have had a more relaxed thing in terms of the self-funding agencies. We are trying really hard to look in detail of everybody, because every dollar counts. It's going to be a really tough budget. And I'm sure you've heard this 100 times. I don't want this to be more than a 101st. But we do appreciate it. We are very careful about what we ask. But this is why we ask so many questions, to understand what's reasonable and what's not. Because the last thing we want to do is kill the goose with the golden eggs, right?
To that point, I appreciate the comment, Representative. And one of the difficulties is in this budget environment, for example, we're expecting another several other gaming operations to come online during the next biennium. And so it's a difficult proposition to simultaneously grow and contract. And so I have to, and you folks want us to manage and regulate all these rooms, and as you should. And so I know asking to fund more positions at a time when other agencies are cutting back is a difficult suggestion. It's just, I also want to do my job and our job and regulate these rooms effectively. So that certainly there's a rubbing point somewhere that hits, but that's certainly I'd like to mention.
So I will want you to speak to some of those future things, but we'll come back to that. Representative Murray?
Thank you very much. Yeah, apropos the upcoming biennium, there are two really big holes here. One is the slots coming on, I forget what it's called, the V, whatever. They're just slots. So there are slots coming on in her budget, which has not gone to Ways and Means, hasn't gone to the House, and I'm really concerned about this little room here dealing with a larger issue. And there's a big gap in terms of, I guess over the biennium, there's 127 million.
17.
107, yeah. In the second one, you're expecting 117 million in 2017. The other big hole is the gap between what the governor thinks you're going to do and what Ways and Means thinks is reasonable. Those are really, really big gaps. And so I appreciate some of the concerns about let's, be consistent, or let's be conservative and careful with our money. But these are two big gaping holes. And what are your thoughts on this? I'm afraid to say, how would you address this? Because that's not necessarily your job, but how do we reconcile that?
If I can take the second part first. The revenue estimates that are derived in House Ways and Means are done by my colleague and I very early in the process. And candidly, as you can imagine, in the fall of last year, we take a very conservative viewpoint of what we expect revenues to be. And that updates over time. And the governor and I spoke about revenue estimates for the out two bienniums, and a couple of things hadn't happened that we anticipated happening. One is sports betting launching in Massachusetts hasn't had quite the impact we anticipated on sports betting revenue. Second, more rooms that we anticipated and the large size of them, as well as the profitability of them, surprised even me. Like, for example, the historic horse racing machines, we did a revenue estimate that these would be essentially $150 a day gross profit, which we all split, but we get a take. they're actually at $239 per machine per day currently. So significantly more than we anticipated. And so when the governor asked, we look at the revenue estimates, we took another look at them, and that's where the number comes from, the 185. It doesn't come from the governor. It came from us having a conversation and coming up with, and particularly where this year is ending up, I think in terms of plan, we're at 168 for this year. And I think we're trending more like 185, 186. So as you can imagine, it's a very difficult proposition to revenue estimate out 2 years when I don't know, or my colleague doesn't know what the gas prices are going to be, or whether the Middle East is going to blow up, or supply chain X or Y is going to be a problem. And so we try and err on the side of caution, but certainly for us, that's where the 185 comes from. And in terms of VLT revenue, I think the disparity is in terms of what the percentage that the state will get as part of its rev share if that activity is authorized. So currently under historic horse racing, the state and charities split 25% of the revenue and the operators get 75%. Under the governor's budget, that split would go to 55% for the operators and 45% to the state and the charities. So it's a matter of you're getting a larger piece of the pie, essentially, because the pie itself will grow significantly. So, sorry, that answer your question? Oh, sorry.
Just as a point of clarification, though, my understanding is that the split between the Education Trust Fund and the General Fund, once that shift in revenue distribution happens, is that less of the proportion will come to the Education Trust Fund. It'll be split 50-50 at that point.
So my favorite part of my job is we just make the money. And so literally it comes to here in a barrel. We drop it off and back away slowly. And so how it gets spent by the folks who are elected is really, as I often say, we don't make policy, instruments of policy. So that is for you folks to decide.
Representative Popovich?
Thank you. You were talking, and thank you for answering again all these questions. You were talking about the differences in timing between your revenue estimates that were used by Ways and Means. I'm a bit confused because obviously you started early, so your original numbers had to be more conservative and less recent. But as the governor works through it, doesn't Ways and Means also refine their numbers? And then why do you have any idea as to why do we still have a significant discrepancy? Because I get it between fall estimates and spring estimates, but all of them are now February estimates. So do you have any?
Certainly that's a matter of us being conservative. Honestly,
Yeah.
if I can suggest, the Christmas time period and the time after Christmas are telling as to what we believe revenues will look like for the year. Christmas is our busiest week. The week after Christmas is our second busiest week. And the weeks thereafter are our worst weeks. And so we don't like to change our revenue estimates through that period. And so for us, it was a matter of not last minute, but certainly the most recent revisitation of it. And the fact that we were more comfortable 6 months, 7 months through the year than we were 2 months through the year, essentially.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a matter of timing. And Jim really doesn't like to overperform, promise and underperform. It's because one of the difficulties of this job, and I would hearken to this, is once you put it in the budget, it's already spent. And so if we don't make it, it's an unpleasant call from people. And so there's a.
We share that philosophy where we'd rather have a bit of a safety margin rather than go over the limb and fall off by an inch or two.
I have been in the room with very uncomfortable conversations with governors in the past, and it's unpleasant. I'd rather avoid it. Just candidly, I'd rather not.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Representative Murray?
Thank you again. So, back to two things. Your conservative estimates are still, I guess Ways and Means is way more conservative in their estimates than you are. They're estimating, the 12, and you're estimating 12 million more than what Ways and Means. So when
Yeah.
you say it's a conservative estimate, it's like, yeah, but Ways and Means is more conservative. That does not address the gap. And the other thing is, you circle back around to actual slot machines? I understand the historic racing, but this is a major change to go from the historic, whatever, I don't even understand it, to slots.
Okay, so the conservative estimate is the 173, that's ours, to Ways and Means, and the 185 to us is what we anticipate would be a reasonable estimate. So both of those are our numbers just based on dates. Yeah, and certainly to VLTs, I would not characterize it as a major seismic change. And the reason I suggest this is because the historic ore processing machines, nothing's going to change is how they look, very little. The cabling's still there, the cameras are still there, the box is going to look the same. It's literally going to be the same box. You're just changing out the content within it and the math behind it. And so it's not well, I understand the words may sound like they're big change. If you walked in on a Monday and they changed it to next Friday, you would notice very little difference. And it's just the player likes it a lot better, VLTs versus HHR. And that's the reason for the revenue estimate and the revenue being raised.
So are you expecting more people to play, or the same number of people to play on the same machines? Or are you expecting more people to play on the same machines? Or are you expecting how many more machines? Because we're going up to 4,000 now if you don't see a big difference between the historic racing and the slot machines.
So it's a physical difference versus a play difference, right? And so the way it plays, the machines do better financially. I anticipate both individuals to play more as well as more people to come play. Because right now there's a large number of people traveling to Boston and Springfield and Plain Ridge and Mohegan Sun and Foxwoods. Because the product in New Hampshire is not the same as the product there. I would anticipate more of them to come up here. And I would expect, particularly in the southern rooms, Nashua, Salem, all on the southern border, they're placed there not by accident, that 2/3 to 3/4 will be mass residents.
I'm sorry, my thing is, so are you suggesting, I'm trying to understand this from a public perspective point of view. It sounds like there's a difference between historic horse racing and slot machines. There are people who are supportive of one, but when you bring up that they're slot machines, then all of a sudden there's a group of people who dig in their heels and say, we did not approve that. I'm sure you remember with Keno, communities had the option to accept Keno into their community or not. I don't think they had the option with the historic horse racing, and I'm not sure where this would end up with. And I'm still surprised that we're discussing it instead of Ways and Means.
Yep. I'm not sure that I answered that question. Yeah, sorry. Okay, all right. No, it's certainly, I'm a subject matter expert on gaming. And so I can submit to you in terms of the math behind it, and if you want, but in terms of policy decisions regarding who gets to approve what is not, yeah.
Representative Hacken.
Yeah, so let's talk about the math. I should disclose that I'm a lawyer by trade, and so math is always something I have to do on a calculator. It's not my most comfortable subject in life, but if I'm looking at the projected revenue, I'm trying to find where my little page is. So 120 million by the end of 27, and 126. Is that right? Or am I reading it wrong? Oh no, sorry. 58.5 million at the end of 27 for revenues on video VLTs. So if you do the math, that's about, is that right? If there's like 58.5% in revenue coming to the state at the end of 27, wouldn't that mean like a total revenue of more like 400?
Yeah, it's more than that.
Okay.
So I don't know what numbers you have in front of you, Representative, so I apologize. I'm talking off of my memory.
I'm just looking at the unrestricted revenues.
Okay.
So
Slide.
if I may,
Yeah.
that number is half, because you're looking at either general fund or
Okay.
education trust
So
fund.
it's really,
it's
really
like 117 million is
Okay.
the governor's estimate in
Yeah.
fiscal 27.
okay. So 127. If you do the breakdown, it'd be more like over 400 million total.
It's more than, in terms of the overall, so.
Like the gross before you do the
So there's,
distribution to the ETF. et
so if I
cetera.
could sort of roll it up a second, so there's what's called handle, which is the activity, and then there's gross revenue, which is money that's left in the till at the end of the day. And then there's what our share is, which is a
Right.
percentage of that. And so we did our revenue estimates based off of what the machine revenue is in similar jurisdictions in the same growth pattern, given the same marketplace. And so essentially, our revenue estimate's based off of $300 a day, what is known as win per unit per day,
Right.
what's left in the machine. I think it was approximately 4,400 machines being up and running by FY27 for 365 days. And so if you do that math, it should yield you somewhere around 270 million, I think. Like I said, I'm a lawyer too by training, so I leave the math to my colleague here, but 300 unit per day is a pretty standard, like Boston right now is over $400 per unit per day. Rhode Island is at 293 per win per unit per day. Maine, which has nobody living near it, is around $250 win per unit per day. So $300 we assumed was actually a pretty legitimate number. And so that's what it's based on. It's the increased product. Sorry.
I'm just thinking ahead. If you divide that total revenue by 1.4 million people in our state, that means like everybody gambles more than $200 a year, right?
No. So as I said before, if you drive into any of the parking lots of as I believe the best kind of money is out-of-state money. And so most of the facilities are on the border intentionally. Like there's one in North Conway on the border, one in Keene on the border, one in Lebanon on the border, Salem on the border, two on Nashua on the border, like Portsmouth on the border. Like the idea being is so I did this math when there was a casino bill. If you put a pinhole in Plastow, I choose Plastow randomly, nothing, just Plastow. And you create that hour driving distance, which is the standard by which casino driving is measured. On the south half of that circle is 1.5, 1.6 million people. On the north half of that is 500,000 people. And so the vast majority of play will drive to New Hampshire. Is my estimates. Geography doesn't care about, retail behavior doesn't care about geography. It's the same logic with liquor. If you believed when liquor sold, we'd all be drunks constantly. And so the majority of liquor sales come from another state. So the same logic applies.
Sure. And I think, Mr. Chair, if you'll just indulge me, I think what we're discussing right now is a pretty big cultural shift of the way people in our region will game. So it sounds like more people from not New Hampshire are going to be here engaging in this new activity. So if we're really not anticipating New Hampshire citizens participating in this new activity as much as out-of-staters, then I think, again, this is really something Ways and Means should be discussing, because it sounds like a pretty big cultural societal shift that we're entertaining right now, this hypothetical. So
Representative Dore?
Thank you for answering all these questions.
Of course.
At you. Do you see a big shift in revenue income coming in the summertime when all of the tourists are here? I mean, can you see a pattern that happens of people waving into New Hampshire, all this money coming in, and the wave going back out? Does that make sense to you?
It does. It's an excellent question. And when we had sports betting and Mass didn't, it was massive. Portsmouth Liquor Store and the Nashua Liquor Store were the two biggest hotspots for sports betting, probably in North America. They would drive there, grab a couple of bottles, and bet while they were in Nashua, because they were in New Hampshire. You could bet in New Hampshire. We don't have that anymore. We sell very similar products to all of our neighbors, and so we don't have the massive shifts. You will get an uptick in certain regions, like the Lakes region does uptick in the summer, but not globally statewide.
Representative Hacken Phillips?
just one more question, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if the assumption is that currently the folks who hold these charitable historical horse racing permits, are you assuming that they will all adjust to the new VLT machines? Or because my understanding is that the investment in those new machines was fairly recently. So are they all willing to just make the jump to the new activity, or is that not your assumption?
So it is my assumption, and it was based off a conversation with virtually every single one of them, and the time period, as I asked all of them what the time period would be to switch. The investment, while significant, is not lost. Most of the machines can be converted. And it's not a small charge because I'm not paying it. It's $3,000 to $4,000 per machine to convert. And so the zeal in which they've asked me makes me think they'll all adopt.
So I'd like to sort of understand what's going on here in terms of the way this comes to pass, because I'm not very familiar with the whole thing. Can the lottery commission just decide to add new, like this, the VLT thing, or can you just sort of explain how that part works? Just
No,
so I understand?
certainly, even if we could, we wouldn't. We want to make sure, like, for example, there was an opinion from the AG's office that we didn't need legislative approval to pass Keno. We still waited for you folks to file a bill and pass it and have the governor sign it, only because I don't want to step out in front of the state in terms of gaming practice and gaming policy. So it would have to come from you folks to say, well, HHR is a very different product than VLTs, and it would require legislative change in order to make that happen. That's my short answer.
So I remember all the hullabaloo over the horse racing thing and voting on that. Have we voted on this, on the VLT?
You have
thing?
not, no. So it exists in three forms, Mr. Chairman. There's a House bill, there's a Senate bill, and then it's contained within HB 1 and 2 of the governor's budget. So,
It is in two, okay.
So it's literally three places. And I don't know which version wins out.
HB2. Oh, I don't know where that bill is, but, so it's an HB2 as well as the other places. That's
Yeah.
how the governor covered her bases.
Correct, yeah. So there's literally, it's all three places at once, and they're all different versions of the same,
What was the House bill number? Do you know?
I, off the top of my
It's
head.
House Bill 728.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we did go over this, if you remember, a couple days ago when we
That
went
sounds
through the
familiar.
trailer bill. It is in here.
Can't keep it all straight.
And just to revisit the process, so House Ways and Means will take up House Bill 728. They haven't had a public hearing yet, and they'll have a report filed on that bill, and that will align still with your timeline of the budget. So this committee could wait for the House policy to be set on VLTs, and then you could override anything in House Bill 2 with what the House passes if you so chose, or you could let it be its own standalone piece of legislation. And historical practice, like we had mentioned earlier this week, is policy-related items in House Bill 2. House Finance has parsed those out to the policy committees for review. So this should be a House Ways and Means task to come up with a decision on this, not necessarily this committee. What we would want to consider is if the House position is to authorize, maybe check back with lottery to see would they need any changes to their operating budget to align with the policy set forth to administer this program.
Representative Popovich?
Thank you. Just to follow up on what Mr. Landrigan just said, I just want to check that as of now, based on what's in HB2, everything is consistent. We are just worried about potentially the House amending or doing something to the legislation that's not current. But we are up to date right now in terms of the revenue projections versus the legal language in HB2/HB 728.
Correct. The only thing we're not up to date on, I think, are positions that would be added to it if this was authorized. And I believe it was in our fiscal note for, it was the Senate version, we put a fiscal note. But other than that, yes.
If it's in a fiscal note, it's there. I mean, we'll
yeah.
worry about it if the bill passes and so on.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's well down the road, of course.
Thank
yes.
you.
Thank you.
Representative Kelly?
All right, we have to, thanks, Mickey.
Thank you. I'm kind of naive about this, but how much of this is internet? My assumption was that sports betting was internet, is iLottery.
So, thank you for the question. And I wish you were better. I'm clearly not, you're not one of our customers, clearly.
I'm so bad that after the big jackpot, it's the day after that I say, oh,
So really, our internet revenue comes from two main sources. About 85% of the activity for sports betting is done mobile internet. About 85%. 15% is done retail. So our sports books, our physical sports books, there's 4 of them. That 15% happens there. And then iLottery is 100% through the internet. And that includes a number of things. Like you could buy a Powerball ticket through the internet. You could buy a Mega Millions ticket through the internet. Bad snowstorm, that obviously spikes because folks can play, but they don't have to leave their house. And you can buy scratch tickets that are interactive on your phone as well. So that iLottery, NetWin is essentially, that's all iLottery, that's all internet.
That's right. That's right. So as a follow-up, how do you monitor what is out of state and sales and what is in-state sales?
Both of the platforms have robust products on them that's governed by a company called GeoComply, which geofences the state border. And so if you are on or near the border, the wager is blocked. The algorithm is so sophisticated. If you're on 89 driving west and you were going to cross the Connecticut River before you finish your wager, the wager will time out. It will know you're going so many miles per hour. The wager is going to take so many seconds, and the wager will time out. So, and the entire universe tested this, those that are opposed to us doing this, and they found no holes in our system.
Representative Popovich?
Just to add a little bit to it, as somebody who may have had a DraftKings account, it's quite annoying because sometimes I swear to God, I am inside the border, but the damn phone doesn't trust me. It's very twitchy near the border. It is very hard. You know, the geofencing is very strict. I don't think we'll have compliance because, again, you guys have federal regulators. You have all the kind of regulators breathing down your necks if you dare. Plus, Massachusetts would throw a fit if you try to sell, you know, to allow bets to be placed while somebody's, God forbid, in Massachusetts. So, yeah, I
If
appreciate
I could, the biggest problem we had was when we launched sports betting, there are 2 sports bars in Portsmouth. One that's well inland, and then one that's on the border of the Piscataqua River. And 350 feet was the distance that was safe for us to say, if you're within 350 feet, and that sports bar couldn't take sports wagers. And the entire patrons went up and left and went to the sports bar, and the owner of that sports bar called and was furious. We had to carve out this one spot on the map for the sports bar that now, okay, they're clearly in Portsmouth, but they're too close to the Piscataqua River to, so it's a very robust product that maintains our geofence.
Of course.
This might be
Representative Roy.
silly, but with all the sports betting that goes on, you have it, I don't bet, so I'm not familiar with all this stuff. But I know all of my family is doing betting online with their sports and what have you. Do we get any of that revenue if people are betting here in New Hampshire on, say, Kansas, or do we
Yes,
get a portion of that?
so yes, we get a very large portion of it. By the way, you asked me for free tickets. Nobody plays in here. I'm just so,
That's not true. I played last weekend.
So sports betting, we are actually the #2 state in the country per capita for sports betting revenue for the state, behind New York only. Every bet placed in New Hampshire, we get a percentage of that revenue. We split it with DraftKings, but it's around 43% of the profit we get. So we have what most characterize as an exceptionally enviable deal. And moreover, DraftKings, as our vendor partner, moved one of their offices to Nashua and hired 20 software developers who work out of an office in Nashua and as a New Hampshire corporation. So not only do they, our vendor partner, they've actually become a business in the state. So we're fans.
Representative Popovich.
Well, it's kind of nice not to have an income tax and sales taxes and all that, but the other point to be made is that people will gamble anyway. It's better that they do it in a properly regulated manner above board where they have legal recourse, because God knows if my friendly bookie who I called on Friday night doesn't quite remember the conversation the same way I do, I cannot exactly go to the judge. While with all this, it's so heavily regulated, it's safe, it gives people a lot of confidence, and we do spend a lot of money to put it into resources to help people who may have an addiction issue and whatnot, if I recall. If you have any details on that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly technology is the easy part because we can set limits on how much you can deposit. You yourself can set limits, which I find to be more effective. If you yourself you would know you have an issue, you can set limits, or you can self-exclude. We have a very large, not very large, I think it's a couple thousand people now that are on an exclusion list that say, close my account, don't take money from me. Also, the call centers are trained to look for certain words. So for example, on a Monday, if somebody says, oh, I need to win tonight in order to pay my bills, their account is disabled, because we try and protect folks from themselves to the extent you can, and give them the tools to make it happen. So the short answer is yes. And as a former organized crime prosecutor, I can tell you with a certainty approaching death and taxes that sports betting went on before it was legal here. So,
Any other questions? Very good. And you didn't think you'd be here long.
I sound like, well,
Well, thank you for your patience.
thank you.
staying
No,
with
of
us.
course, please, happy to
Mr.
do it.
Chair.
I've
Chairman
learned a
of the
lot and I
committee.
really appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, there is
Sir.
a section in the trailer bill. It's that boilerplate language. It's in the back of House Bill 1 about the, so that went from 6 million to 15
Yeah,
million. Can
there's
you
an increase.
Speak to that.
Certainly, I apologize. I should have spoken to that. There's specific language that authorizes us to buy scratch tickets. It's been there since the 70s. And the amount hasn't changed since I've been here, it's 6 million a year. We've exceeded that annually. And LBA audit team has pointed that out. And so we were looking to increase the amount. It doesn't change anything in the budget. It's just an ability to increase what we buy from scratch tickets during the biennium. And so that's the language. It literally just changes 6 million to 15 million. It doesn't change anything else.
And that's increasing the number, the amount of scratch tickets you can purchase?
No, it's actually just increasing the amount we're allowed to do, even though, and I hate to say this, we spent more than that annually, because we've increased scratch ticket sales from almost doubled it in the last 10 years. And so we're buying more scratch tickets and we're more profitable at them. So the cost has gone up. And so,
So does it increase in the number of scratch tickets you can buy?
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it's not a expense of the budget. Like it's not a,
Yeah, no, I understand.
yeah. Yeah, it's just literally just that we have, because we're buying way more, we have to increase the number,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
authorization, that's all.
Got it.
Correct, yeah, it's more, yeah.
So that's HB1, and then HB2 has the language authorizing the video gaming
It does, yes.
to begin with. Okay. And there's something else about that language, the video gaming. Oh, Representative Murray raised the question about towns, cities, whatever, having any ability to regulate it. So which one was it that they could?
It was
The
Keno that could.
So Keno, that was part of the law that said they could? And
Well,
the
it's
other,
actually, to that point, it's more than just Keno. It's Keno and sports betting. And when the lottery was originally founded in 1963, towns and cities were allowed to say no to selling lottery tickets. About, I think 10 did. But yes, so those provisions exist in those three areas, but not in the VLT bill. I know I think there's a bill filed to have the towns have an option going forward. I don't remember the number, but it's
okay, but not in HB2 in any
not
case.
HB2, no.
Okay,
H1,
so it mirrors what's going on with the horse
correct. Yeah.
betting approach.
It mirrors what horse racing, historic horse racing allowed, yes.
Thank you. So I guess maybe we're really done now. Are you all set? Okay. Thank you very much, both of you. Appreciate it. Are you guys all set? Yeah. Okay.